God podcast. My name is James Burke. I am a member of 2nd and 3rd Rathfriland Presbyterian Church, and I'm really excited to share this podcast with you. You know, this situation with COVID-19 threatens to distance our church family, and this is a serious thing for a church, because when we are separated from each other, we lose contact with each other. And if we no longer speak to one another, then how can we love one another? In Philippians 1:9, Paul says, "It is my prayer that your love may abound more and more with knowledge and all discernment." Think of love as water in a fountain. Beneath the surface of the fountain, where nobody can see, water is being stirred up and being pushed to the surface. Let's say the fountain is faulty. The water wants to spring up into something beautiful, but it comes out a few leaky holes and spurts out wherever it can escape. This is like a person who loves without any knowledge of the other person. Their affection for the person is there, but they don't actually know how to act upon that affection. They may end up spurting out a few words here and there, which causes more harm than good. But love that stirs up and is being applied with knowledge and discernment because you actually know the other person, well, that is like a fountain designed so beautifully, it captivates the eye. And it pleases its creator, and indeed gives glory to the creator. I want our church to be like the second fountain, loving each other well because we know each other well. And we would therefore be doing what we were created to do. But we find ourselves in a dilemma because of this pandemic. We can no longer meet as we used to and talk as we used to. So that got me thinking, what can we do so that we can have fruitful conversations as a church? I'm a big fan of podcasts. When you listen to them, it's kind of like you join in the conversation and get to know who the people in the podcast actually are. Then I also remembered a friend once giving me dating advice. He said the best question to ask a girl on a first date is, tell me your testimony, because that's how you really get to know the person. I haven't got to try this tactic yet, but it got me thinking about the podcast and what it should be based on. Not me dating, but testimonies, where people in our congregation could come on and share their testimonies of how God rescued them from what was once an insignificant and meaningless life and redirected them to follow Him into a life of real purpose and real meaning. This is a story of how God, through Jesus Christ, by the Spirit, met with someone and changed their life. And so the title of the podcast is based off 1 Corinthians 8:3. But if anyone loves God, he is known by God. What does it mean to love God, and what does it mean to be known by God? Well, the fountain analogy I used earlier can also be applied to our relationship with God. As I said before, think of love as water, and us as a fountain that springs up that water. Now, before the fountain has any water in it, what is it but a hollow, nice-looking ornament, which is utterly useless and doesn't fulfill its purpose? I suppose you could call it dead. But the fountain begins to be filled with water, and slowly but surely the fountain begins to spring up water, beautifully doing what its creator intended it to do. When the fountain is dead, lifeless, there's no water in it, this is like the person who is dead in their sins. The person who does not know God and therefore cannot love Him. For they in and of themselves, have no love, but they are spiritually dead. But when the Creator comes along and fills the fountain with His water, this is like a spiritual awakening where the life-giving love of God is poured into us. In other words, the Spirit of God is poured into us. This is called the new birth, where a person is regenerated by the Spirit and He then dwells in us and enables us to understand the love of God revealed to us in God's Word. And when the water begins to spring up, this is like when we begin to love God, because we begin to know who He truly is and what He has done for us. And we begin to love Him by doing what He had always intended us to do, which is give glory to Him. And give glory to Him by enjoying Him. His life-giving love is a free gift. It's not a gift He gives to all, but only to those whom He has chosen. It is a gift to His elect. The dead fountain would not spring up water no matter how hard it tried, because it was dry, but it needed someone to give it water. And no one can truly love God unless God has first loved them. And He loves those whom He chooses, and He chooses those whom He loves. And He loves before time began, long before we ever existed. And I suppose this is what the verse means when it says known by God. It's another term for election. This is why this podcast is named Known by God, because it is the fundamental and mind-blowing basis of our story of how God made a dry fountain spring. Our story of how God made us who were once dead and live. These are stories of God's supernatural grace in ordinary people. These are stories of hope worth sharing with others. So it's a bit of an introduction of why the Known by God podcast exists and what it will entail. Simply conversations of how God changed the people in our congregation. I'm really excited to start, and the videos will be going up every Thursday. So see you all soon, and God bless.